Hello and welcome to the Moonshots Podcast. It's episode 270. I'm your co-host, Mike Parsons, and as always, I'm joined by the man himself, Mr. Mark Pearson Freeland. Good morning, Mark.
Hey, good morning, Mike. Good morning, subscribers, viewers, listeners, and everybody in between. Once again, show number 270. Mike, first of all, that's a lot of shows. I reckon we've learned a lot of tips, tricks, and tools along the way. But don't you worry, listeners and subscribers. We are not done yet, are we, Mike?
We have got so much more, and I think we are starting a new series with a very unusual book.
That's right, Mike. You're quite right. Unusual is definitely how I would describe some of what I think we're going to lean into today, and some of the content and themes within the book by Phil Stutz and Barry Michels, The Tools. Now, just to go a level deeper on this book, Mike, the subheader for this book, 5 tools to help you find courage, creativity, and willpower and inspire you to live life in forward motion. That, I think, Mike, is already setting the scene for you and I and all of our listeners with regards to some of the delights and some of the themes I think we're going to encounter exploring this book. Because, as we might know, in some veins, this is a self-help book. In other veins, it's about helping us get through some of life's challenges, maybe building that little bit of resilience or getting through some psychological barriers that are holding us back. I think there's a lot of interesting concepts and themes within this book, The Tools, that I think might, as we've already said, surprise some of us.
I'm going to take it further, Mark, and say I think it might be a little bit uncomfortable, a little disruptive for some of us, particularly for the hardcore moonshotters, because what Stutz and Michels do in their book, The Tools, is in order to keep you in like forward motion, they are taking these themes of courage and resilience, creativity and innovation, as well as drive and like the capacity to keep going. And somehow they've made this exotic cocktail of some unusual practices, some exciting practices. And it's not too woo-woo because, we got a psychiatrist, a psychologist. Like, these guys are serious men of science, but they've figured out this new way to keep us moving forward. So if you're looking to refresh your take, not just on being productive or having the heart to be resilient, that you really want to refresh everything between and certainly in the middle of those two things, this is the book for you. And I think even if you've got some great resilience and productivity happening, I think what this book is going to do is challenge, maybe open up possibilities for you that you didn't know existed. So Mark, where do we begin?
Whoa, with all of that, head nod and introduction, Mike, I wouldn't know where to start. So why don't we hear from the authors themselves? We're going to hear, first of all, from Barry Michels. He's going to help us understand, maybe leaning in a little bit to the areas that you were just describing, Mike, maybe some discomfort for some of our listeners, or maybe some good reminders to get us off on the right foot with regards to today's topic. So let's hear from Barry Michels, author of The Tools. Help us understand a little bit more about self-restraint, and how maybe that can actually set us free.
Self-restraint sets you free. Now, I know that sounds like a Zen koan or some neologism from Orwell's 1984, war is peace, ignorance is strength. But it's true. Self-restraint sets you free. Now, why does it sound so strange? Because we think of freedom as we get to do whatever we want whenever we want to. Essentially, we think of freedom as freedom from outer rules and restrictions. Anyone who's ever gone 90 miles an hour on the way to Vegas knows this feeling. I'm free. It's fabulous, okay? The problem is you might get killed, you could get incarcerated, but even worse, next time, 90 ain't gonna do it. You gotta go 95. And the time after that, you gotta go 100. This is the strange demonic paradox of that type of freedom, which is it doesn't end up creating a sense of freedom, it actually ends up enslaving you. Think of a drug addict. Starts off like, I can do anything I want, ends up, I just need it every fucking day. So this is the strange paradox of the way we think of freedom, because we've misdefined it. Real freedom is not freedom from outer rules and restrictions. Inner freedom is inner. It's the freedom from impulses. Think about what an impulse is. It is a compelling force that tells you you must do something or must have something. Well, if you must, then you're not free. So as strange as it sounds, the more self-control you exercise, the freer you actually feel. If any of you are interested in philosophy like I am, there's philosophical precedent for this. In Friedrich Nietzsche's, the German philosopher's concept of the Übermensch, which was horribly mistranslated into the Superman and made for some bad times in Nazi Germany when it was misappropriated and exploited terribly. But what Nietzsche, if you read Nietzsche in the original, what he really meant by the Übermensch was someone who could master the lowest parts of himself, someone who could overcome the worst aspects of himself. And in the freedom that he gained from his own lower parts, he could become the person he was meant to be. It was inner freedom, inner mastery.
Ooh, inner freedom. Mark, I really relate to this because I feel that I had this moment many, many years ago where I truly kind of decided that I had to stop being lazy and really put in the effort, right? And in many ways, that was a self-constraint, a self-restraint, you might say as well, where I put the rule onto myself because I hadn't held myself accountable. So when I hear this idea that self-restraint sets you free, it is the capacity to desire a cookie but say no. It is the capacity not to hit the snooze button because you decide that you made a commitment to get up at that time. And actually, what's on the other side of this is when you learn self-restraint, self-control, when you are self-directed, you become autonomous. You don't need anyone to tell you to do the work. You do it because you want to, you choose to. And I believe that from that, we not only get confidence, Mark, but I think satisfaction and fulfillment comes from when you said, I'm going to work hard, and you did. I'm going to get the job done, and you did. You weren't forced. You weren't cajoled. You weren't nudged along the way. You had the capacity for self-autonomy, self-restraint, control to get it done. You know, when you think about friends and people you know, I have a great friend, and he is just so incredibly disciplined at doing the work. And not only do you sense that in his confidence, but man, I respect the guy because he is self-restrained. He does the work because he chose to. Nobody else told him to. And so I think what happens is when we all have moments where we set ourselves a goal and we did it, and nobody else told us to do it, there's some deep, long-lasting sense of satisfaction that you don't get when someone says, do the work, and you do it, and you're like, that's almost like a relief, right? Because you know someone's on your back, get it done. But when you are on your own back and saying, I must get it done, and you get it done, you kind of sit back, and it's different to feeling relieved. It's like, damn, I got it done, and I chose to get it done, and I promised to myself. There's some level of self-respect, self-esteem, self-compassion, and it resonates because I think that's when you're being your true self, achieving the things that you set out to, keeping your promises to yourself. And I think this is so damn powerful. What do you think, Mark?
Look, I agree, Mike. And I think the way that I can see this type of self-restraint being utilized in my life, when I think about, obviously, the topic that Barry was taking us on there, particularly talking about Nietzsche, you know, freedom, you get self-restraint and you benefit from having the freedom away from addictions, away from actions that might negatively impact you. Maybe
Right.
that's anger, bitterness, frustration, as well as reaching for another cookie or hitting that snooze button. There's so many things that with freedom, we're able to say yes to when actually they're going to be negative in the long run. The way that I can see, particularly what you were just saying there in terms of accomplishments, is how we always talk about on the show, mantras. We talk about Cal Newport and goals, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. I think a lot of the idea of freedom is associated with not being in a specific role, maybe having your own business, maybe working for yourself, whatever it is. But actually, that isn't the end of the game. You
Mm.
have to put in the practices or the guardrails, I suppose, that helps you stay on track.
Right.
Because once you do get out into, let's say you're on holiday mode, what's one of the first things you disregard on holiday mode? Probably looking at your emails,
Right.
picking up the phone.
Working out,
Exactly, working out.
diet,
Yeah, diet. This is exactly
sleep.
it. Maybe abstaining from a second beer or so.
Yeah.
And when you remove those guardrails, the first thing to go is, diligence and
Right.
discipline.
Right.
And then in the long run, exacerbate that by time, suddenly you've gone a little bit off the rails. So to have, and I think this is where the guys are going with regards to self-control and restraint in my mind, you need the guardrails to help you achieve that best version of yourself, as
Oh
we've
my
said
God.
on the
Yes.
show. You need that guidance, maybe not a map, but just control to help you get to that point, because we all know how distracting life can be.
Yes. And so what comes from that is confidence and fulfillment and satisfaction. So it's not in search of like permanent vacation, permanent holiday, but rather the truest freedom is when you can do the work because you chose to and nobody told you to do it. To me, that is the ultimate capacity. If you want to talk about being superhuman, that is like, I choose to wake up early on my weekends because I want to, not because I have to, because I want to. I choose to stretch and journal on my weekends because I want to, because I have to. That to me is like great self-restraint and discipline and the chance to feel good after it. And I tell you, there's a bunch of people, Mark, who are feeling real good right now, and that is our members.
You're totally right, Mike. Talking about empowerment, wanting to do something is exactly what our members, our Moonshots members, have done. All of them go out there with absolute intention on being that best version of themselves. And we like to celebrate that here on the Moonshots show. So please welcome in all of our members: Bob, Niles, Dietmar, Marjan, Connor, Lisa, Sid, and Mr. Bonjour, Paul, Berg, Kalman, Joe, Christian, Samuela, Barbara, and Deborah, Lasse, Steve, Craig, Ravi, Evat, Raul, Nikawara, and Ingram, Dirk, Venkata, Marco, and Jet, Roger, Steph, Raw, and Diana, Christoph, Denise, Laura, Smitty, Corey, Daniela, Mike and Antonio, Zachary, Austin, Fred and Ola, Andy, Diana, Margie, Jasper, Fabian, Guhong, and Edward. Guys, high five to all of you. You go out, you make it happen. You want to learn. You want to learn out loud with us. That's even better. All of you, I think, are living this idea of practicing, putting things into action, and having that self-restraint and control of where you want to go.
I think we are so grateful. I was going to say we are so gratitudinal, which is a new word, Mark, in the Moonshot Circuit. Yes. But we really are grateful to those folks because so many of those people have been supporting us for years, and they are showing not only their resilience but their generosity. So we're very thankful to them. Now, I think it's time to really get into the work of Stutz and Michels here. And one of the things we've talked about a lot of books that focus on grit, such as the book by Angela Duckworth, resilience, Goggins, we cannot mention him enough. But there still is work to do, right? In when those moments come, when the uncomfortable moments come, no matter how good you are, there's always the temptation to like crumble under the pressure. So what's great is if we study the work of The Tools by the two authors, I think what is revealed in that, there are some new ways to think about adversity, Mark.
Oh, you're totally right, Mike. Without revealing what book immediately came to my mind as we were digging into this particular tool, let's hear from Book Summary IQ, who's going to teach us about powering through those tough situations and how the two authors encourage us to welcome adversity.
What's on your immediate must-do list that fills you with fear or even dread? Is there anything that you've been putting off for a really long time? It's human nature to avoid what we don't like, but uncomfortable and even painful situations are inevitable. In most cases, the challenges themselves aren't what hold people back from achieving their greatest potential. It's the avoidance of taking the next step to unlock the possibilities. The first tool helps you not only power through tough situations, but learn to use them to your benefit. We're not talking about just accepting adversity, but actually being glad to see it when it inevitably appears. Might sound bizarre, but it's a powerful way to reframe the role difficulty has in your life. So here's an exercise. First, visualize the emotion surrounding the task or the situation. Whatever it is, the emotion may be fear of a difficult conversation going badly, or perhaps it's the humiliation if you slip up while giving a speech. Or it may be a less rational emotion, such as having a fear of flying, despite statistics showing air travel is much safer than driving. Whatever the pain is, give it a visual in your mind and ask it to envelop you. As it does, accept it eagerly with the belief it will bring something good. Focus your mind on that good as you move yourself through and out, thanking the pain as you go for what's on the other side. Regardless of the outcome, you'll gain power in overcoming the mental block, which is a win in itself. That satisfaction will encourage you to use the tool again and again to the point where you will naturally welcome pain points. Meanwhile, you're moving forward, which is the force that drives life itself. Using this tool also builds your capacity for commitment, which is essential for making meaningful long-term changes. Take the author's example of a beat cop who had initially pursued his talent for writing in college only to later drop out. Storytelling remained his passion, as evidenced by his ability to keep listeners engaged in tales he shared at the bar after work. However, he had an aversion to the extra focus needed to commit those stories to writing. Using the tool to overcome his uncomfortable feelings about concentration, he finally reignited his writing ability and pursued the career he'd always wanted.
Oh, Mark, this is getting into some very important mindset practices around tough times. And the way that I'm processing this is it's the nuance between dreaming and visualizing of an outcome or a goal you have. So let's say someone's really self-conscious about speaking in front of a group of people. They might have this visualization that they have of themselves being up on the stage and being confident and delivering their big keynote speech successfully. So that's one type of visualization. But what the authors talk about here in the tools is they go a step further, and this is something we've touched on occasionally in the show. You can visualize not only the outcome, but you can visualize the steps you take towards the outcome. So this nuance is really important because we often get stuck in the early steps. So when you have to write an outline of the speech and you're a bit lost, you can start by visualizing yourself not giving the speech, but you can actually bring that visualization much more short term right to the here and now. And you can sit and visualize yourself writing a great table of contents, a great outline, sort of a frame or a thread, like a half page of 10 points. So you don't only have the option to dream of the final glorious crescendo moment, but you can bring those visualizations much more closer to hand. So for example, doing a marathon, you can dream of crossing the finish line in the race, or you can visualize yourself doing the training tomorrow. You can visualize, I'll go even further. You can visualize the moment in the training tomorrow where you know it's going to get hard, but you keep going. These humble visualizations are what they're talking about. So don't fall in love only with the destination. You can visualize every single step of the way. So when that hill comes, you know this hill is what hurts. You're only running 10K. And you said you're going to do a marathon of 42K, but you're only doing a 10K. And there's Heartbreak Hill. It's at kilometer 7. And you're like, oh dear. But you can be prepared that I am going to keep going. I'm not going to stop because I know I have visualized continuing to run through the discomfort. And this is an option I think many people are not even aware of. And what the authors are doing here for us is giving us the chance to apply those short-term visualizations of just getting through the hard work when it's not glamorous, when there's nobody looking, where there is no finish line. I think this is extremely powerful because what we all suffer from is we dream of the final destination, but then we've not actually considered the steps along the way, which is full of heartbreak and suffering and challenge, the valley of darkness. Mark, how do you see this kind of visualization technique to move through tough situations?
Well, first of all, I'm reminded of Jim Carrey, who has always utilized or said he utilized a lot of visualization when it came to that year where he was in all sorts of movies, Liar, Liar, The Mask, Ace Ventura. I remember him in one of the shows that we did stating, I always imagined earning that much money, or I always envisioned being on the stage, to a lot of applause, regardless of whether he wanted the applause or not. What he did was, and this is talking to your endpoint visualization, just to be clear to our listeners, he always envisioned that endpoint, and that's what drove him onwards. Whereas I like where you're going with this, Mike, which is boiling it down into smaller steps, because I think you're right. If we can build in smaller steps, which I think is what the authors are talking about, we can make it more of a habit.
Yes.
So an example for me, and I've just picked back up Viktor Frankl's A Man's Search for Meaning.
Search for Meaning.
And this idea around adversity for me immediately made me think, what I think Phil and Barry are encouraging us to do is start associating positive vibes around those challenging moments. So when we see those challenges, as you've already said on today's show, discomfort, good.
Right.
But I think you're right, where they're really leading us with these visualizations and these practices. And what I think they are showing us and teaching us today that's different is you can imagine it on a much smaller scale. You can imagine just getting up at the right time.
Right.
You set your alarm for 6. Hey, imagine waking up at 6 o'clock and knowing that everybody else in your household is asleep.
Right.
What a fantastic moment. Or putting on your shoes and knowing that you're about to go and hit the tarmac. Imagine those small little positive steps to then encourage you to come back and do it again.
And let's do a little build on that. Let's use the running analogy. Let's say I'm doing a 10K tomorrow, and I know kilometer 7 is the hard one. Can you imagine how good it will feel when I break through the 7th kilometer? Because I've had the visualization the day before. I could see myself getting to the hill, and I keep going. So when I get to kilometer 8, 9, and 10, I'm going to have a real spring in my step because I had this visualization that I'd get through it. And I'll tell you why I think this is important. We can get so romanced by the destination. When all the ugly, hard stuff happens in the middle, we freak out because we're not prepared. But inversely, what happens when we power through these tough situations with visualization, we can feel a sense of reward because you said to yourself, I want to get through and do the 10K. I want to keep running when I hit the big hill. So when you do so, it feels far more substantial because you were prepared for it and you kept going. You achieved the goal. So the satisfaction is increased rather than being someone who hasn't thought it through. You get to kilometer 7 and it becomes a near-death experience because you hadn't contemplated. You're like, this is one steep hill. I think I have to walk. But no, you visualized yourself going through it. You were prepared. I think this is incredibly powerful thinking, Mark. But what's crazy to think, Mark, we're now about to get into the real stuff in this book. We've kind of set the scene a bit with adversity and self-control. Mark, we're about to go deep. So what do we got next on this journey into the book called The Tools by Phil Stutz and Barry Michels?
Well, Mike, we've already made the case, I think, and reminded our listeners and members around this idea of adversity. And I think that connection back into the first clip we had around self-restraint is part and parcel. If you are celebrating and embracing, visualizing those moments of pain, you're demonstrating that self-control and self-restraint, which then enables you to go out and be in the moment and go and do your best job. Where we're now going to take the show for all of those eagle-eared listeners of us is a little bit more into the practical, mindful steps and even mantras that all of us can start to utilize in our lives. So, Mike, there's a number of tools, as we've already mentioned, within the book, The Tools. So we're going to cherry pick a couple of them here, which I think are going to appeal to our listeners and members. But first of all, we're going to kick off with one lesson, one theme that I know is very, very close to the hearts of all of us here on the Moonshot Show. And that idea is gratefulness.
Silently say to yourself specific things in your life you're grateful for, particularly items you'd normally take for granted. Go slowly and feel the gratitude for each item. Don't use the same items repeatedly. Stretch for new ones. After about 30 seconds, stop thinking and focus on the physical sensation of gratefulness. You'll feel it coming directly from your heart. This energy you feel is the grateful flow. As this energy emanates from your heart, your chest will soften and open. In this state, you will feel an overwhelming presence approach you, filled with the power of infinite giving. You've made a connection to the source.
Oh, Mark, I think we can have some fun with this because we talk about gratitude to some extent with some of the mindfulness work. But to me, what we have to realize that gratitude is a tool by which you can engender well-being, connectedness in yourself in this moment. So let's have some fun. Let's do some gratitudes that we think, let's see if we can do a bunch of gratitudes that apply to everyone. So I got one for you. I think we can all say that we're grateful that we are working on ourselves because you, me, and all of the thousands of listeners right now who are listening together, we're all trying to be a little bit better, right? And that's something to be grateful for, that it's a shared experience, right?
I think you're totally right. It is something that we all can go through and notice, much like maybe appreciating and have gratitude for those around us, friends, family, and loved ones. I think something that we can all remember is that sort of love that we receive from those around us, whether they're kids, siblings, partners, mothers, fathers, and so on, or even just friends.
How about this one? Like, I could do something really base that we are all right now listening to this show and this conversation. We have the time to even think about being better. Like, we can be grateful for that. We can even do things like this, that we're all grateful that we're here breathing and living, that we're here and ready to take another breath. Like, how much that's just like, you can just bring it right back. Did you have a nice cup of coffee today? I can be grateful for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? It's funny. I remember when we did our show on the Dalai Lama, and the art of happiness and how happiness is a
great.
muscle
Yeah.
and you can train it. The more practice and the more time you invest in, sort of building or feeling, happy, you actually notice it more regularly. I found, Mike, ever since that show, really being active and thinking about the things that I have gratitude for. Maybe it's getting together on the Moonshots podcast. Maybe it's all of our members. Maybe, like you say, it's a nice cold walk or a hot cup of coffee. Whatever big or small they are, noticing them once, twice a day suddenly becomes a lot easier the more times you do it.
Yes.
And what's fascinating about that, then I've noticed it helps me feel more comfortable, more confident,
Yes.
and actually probably a lot more pleasant to be around because I appreciate, the beautiful city that we're in Sydney and the amazing coffee that we have.
Oh yeah. Well, we got plenty of that in Sydney. But here's the other thing, like you can just choose to tune into this. I went on a lovely walk before the show, right? How grateful can I be for that? That's like really, really good. And the other crazy thing is as you say or write out your gratitudes, here's the craziest thing. You can just choose to smile while you consider them. And you will literally, at a physiological level, you will experience joy, maybe a little warmth. That's a choice that you can make right now. So if you want to be in forward motion, being an old grumble bum ain't the way to do it. We know, bring some good vibes and you'll get good vibes in return. So gratitude is huge. And so if you're interested in some of the work, we mentioned the Dalai Lama, we've talked about Eckhart Tolle and the power of now. Head over to moonshots.io. You can get all of our back catalog there. So if you're enjoying this and you want to go on a deep dive, you'll find them there. But Mark, we have still got two more big ideas to like really unleash, to discuss and to dissect. What's the next one on the list from the guys and the authors of The Tools?
Well, I tell you what, Mike, this one is a little bit of a step change for you and I. Normally it's David Goggins. Normally it's power through. And also maybe a little bit of here and there on critical conversations and so on. We're actually going to take this in the next clip, Mike, is a little bit towards the word love. So we're going to hear from Barry and Michels' area and tools within the book, broken down for us into, again, a very similar mindful practice as the one we just heard on gratefulness. But this time we're going to understand how to transform resentment and practice what they call active love.
Concentration. Feel your heart expand to encompass the world of infinite love surrounding you. When your heart contracts back to normal size, it concentrates all this love inside your chest. Transmission. Send all the love from your chest to the other person, holding nothing back. Penetration. When the love enters the other person, don't just watch, feel it enter. Sense a oneness with them. Then relax and feel all the energy you gave away return to you.
So we are definitely entering the spiritual realm here on the Moonshots podcast. What a lovely voice she's got. But here's the thing. What I got, and it's so funny because I got it from the Dalai Lama's book. Like, in the end, we all share one thing, no matter what disagreements we may have or conflict. Like, we're all humans, right? So if you can find your way back to, if you have no points of connection with someone, there's always going to be one, and that is that they're a human, you're a human, right? And if you can bring yourself back to that and just appreciate someone on the other side, knowing that they're a human and you're a human, you might disagree on almost everything else, but you've got that in place. And as you would them towards you, you should act to them, which is if they see nothing in common with you, that they at least will see that you and respect that you're a human and you will offer that. If you do that, then you take away so much of the resentment. And if that's not enough, there is so much writing and research in relationships that show that so many times when there are negative things between people, people perceiving actions as being unfair and that cause resentment, invariably the sort of the person that committed the trespass has very little idea of the mistake that they made towards that one. So often resentment is felt by someone who received some sort of trespass, but actually the person who did the wrong thing often it has no idea because they're all caught up in themselves, right? So the problem is that we all tend to be a bit caught up in ourselves. So we're all thinking, he did me wrong, she did me wrong, they did me wrong, the world's doing me wrong. But actually, everyone's just busy sorting their own stuff out and is largely not aware of the mistakes that they're making. So we all know at some point we've made a mistake. So if you can then just say, look, I'm just going to come back to the idea, they're a person, I'm a person. Hey, they might not be aware of what they've done, but the one thing I can always do is come back. The two of us are human beings on the planet, and that's a reason to be respectful, but also not to give in to the resentment, because we have a lot of examples around the world right now where resentment has been held on to, right? And you can just point at things happening in the Middle East or in Ukraine, and you're like, okay, that's a problem. So if we can just work to be a little bit more letting go of resentment and coming back to the fact that so many times people make mistakes and not aware of them, and be forgiving, let go of that energy, because it just doubles up. You get angry at me, I get angry at you, the temperature rises. So then you get angrier at me, and then I get angry at you, and then it ends up in a big mess, right? So at some point, pay it forward, let it go.
Look, I love this idea. I think there's such a lesson in letting go of resentments. You're totally right. In all the times for me, Mike, if I've ever, struggled with somebody, more likely than not, they forgot about it within 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe they didn't even know they were doing it. You're totally right. Whether it's somebody cutting you off on your drive to work, splashing you with a puddle, I don't know, taking your coffee, whatever it might be, you might think, oh, I'm really annoyed about this. Why are you giving that situation power? Why are you distracting yourself?
Such a good point. Such a cool. Don't give it power, but even more so, I think the clinical scientific thing is, for sure, nothing good ever comes from resentment.
No.
Nothing good. Like, so if someone cuts in front of you on the road, like, what do you hope to achieve getting angry and hitting the horn and screaming? Like, what? Like, it's a terrible equation.
It's a terrible equation. And more often than not, there's going to be other people, maybe your family in the car. Why give them the impression that you're so frustrated? Why spoil the mood? Okay. It's hard to do, easier said. But isn't it an amazing skill if we can build this ability to transform it? It gives you back the power.
So just imagine you're like your iPhone. You have limited, battery, right? Do you want to give your personal battery to being negative? Because often being negative is like a big trap. Like, negativity encourages negativity, right? So it's not like you can be just like incredibly resentful and grumpy, and then at a click of a switch, it's all good again. No, it lingers like a bad smell, right?
Yeah, it totally does.
So you're using a finite resource, which is your energy. So it's, I would say, like, an argument that I would make to myself is, what do you hope to gain? And really, where else could that energy be going that is way more positive, way more constructive, and that you get something back from, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. There's a mantra I have on my Todoist each day, Mike. It's a Maya Angelou quote, and it's somewhat related, so I'll share it. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Yes.
And what a perfect example or a build when we're talking about harboring resentment and that negative energy. Instead, put on a smile, showcase, maybe a bit of positivity,
Yeah.
maybe showcase a positive emotion. Hey, you know what? Maybe that bloke isn't going to splash anybody else. Maybe he's not going to get in front of you on the traffic. A smile ends up going a long way.
So here's another thing that I learned is you can acknowledge that there's a feeling of resentment. But when you say, okay, I'm feeling a bit resentful right now, the key thing is to follow that with, and I'm letting it go. So for example, you can say, I'm letting it go. And then you might have a mantra about, I am healthy, I am happy. And you might say that 5 times until you literally, so if I have a negative thought, I'll go, I am healthy, I am healthy, I am healthy. Like I interrupt the thought pattern. And I don't just say the mantra once. I'll say it until I break it. So you literally have this option. Oh, I'm thinking negative. I'm getting into like a negative framing, or I'm complaining about something. I'm complaining about someone. Stop. I am healthy. I am happy. I am healthy. Interrupt it. That's a choice. We can just choose that path. But I think, when you see people going on a rant and they just go on and on, this to me, that's a choice, as is saying, no, I acknowledge I'm feeling resentment, but I'm going to let it go. I'm healthy. I am happy. I am healthy. I am happy. And you'll be amazed at the power of just saying a mantra like that for 5 or 10 times. And you totally, our brains just jump. They're like, okay, all right, I'm healthy. Because here's the truth. In our subconscious, at some point, if you keep priming it with positive thinking, it accepts the positive thinking and lets go of the negative. I think we just find ourselves holding on to them, don't we?
Yeah, I love that idea. Again, our brains are pretty easily distracted, as we know. So it only takes one person. Maybe you've woken up on the right side of the bed. Maybe even you've had a run and you feel pretty good. It could only take one person to ruin that mood. Why let them? Yes. So you're right. By having good mantras, when we were talking about doing your best and everything in life, it's a similar case. If you find that you're struggling with setting up that new business, have the mantra of knowing I've done my best. I'm doing my best. I'm going to be a good boss, or whatever it might be. I think, Mike, as we're learning from this show, these tools are small little reminders that we can give ourselves each day. They are kind of like mantras that we just need to repeat each day. And we know that there's no overnight success, but what we do know is 1% better each day makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And each of these elements, isn't it?
And I think just the choice to say, okay, we're disagreeing. I am experiencing resentment, but I'm going to let it go. I don't want to hold on to it. Forget that you have a job, or forget that you have an obligation to someone on the other side to do so. Just do it for yourself. I'm not going to spend my finite resource of energy. I'm not going to waste the battery on this crappy, negative, bad line of thinking. I'm just going to reroute. I'm happy, I am healthy. I'm happy, I'm healthy. And you are going to take control of yourself, which ironically is something that we talked about at the very beginning of the show. But Mark, classic moment. There is just one more idea. We ain't finished yet, are we?
Look, there's always a time in the show where we're nearing the end, but there's sometimes I just want to go that level deeper, really get into the skin and the minds of our authors. Well, good news, listeners and members, we're about to do that with the last clip in today's show. We promise you something a little bit spiritual, a little bit different, with this final exercise, this final mindful practice and mantra is going to take us to the, let's call it the echelon beyond. So we're going to hear from the same team that we've just listened to in the last couple of clips, now help us understand how we might be able to reduce feelings of, let's say, being overwhelmed or feeling exhausted through some simple practices. But Mike, the benefit here is those practices are a little bit different. So let's hear all about Phil and Barry's concept of the vortex.
Visualize 12 suns. See them in a circle lined up directly over your head. Summon the vortex by silently screaming the word "help" at the circle of suns with focused intensity. This will set the entire circle of suns spinning, creating a gentle, tornado-shaped vortex. Relax and allow your body to become one with the vortex. Feel the pull of the vortex as it lifts you up through the circle of suns. Once you're through the circle, feel yourself grow into a giant with unlimited energy, moving slowly but deliberately through the world without any resistance.
Mark, we're ending on, shall we say, an ethereal theme. Would you not agree?
I totally would. And I like this theme. We've spoken already about visualizations, and we spoke about this idea of welcoming adversity. I think, Mike, and it's going to be something that I want to put into practice a little bit, and I want to hear your opinion about the 12 suns, maybe over a good long black one day. But this idea of really channeling that vortex and imagining yourself in it and coming through it, I think really is just another helpful way of us imagining those difficult moments and being prepared.
Yeah.
Or at least being able to visualize ourselves getting through it.
Yes.
So that when those moments, those vortexes maybe do come along, maybe we're a little bit more used to the idea.
Yeah. For me, Mark, there was a key word in that clip, which was help. And I think what we find ourselves doing is resisting help. In fact, I would say it's not just resisting, we are not even open to help. When you see people that they're just on a path of negativity, or they're almost indulging in the self-suffering.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're embodying victimhood. Those people are not open to help. They're almost, poor me, poor me. But the way you turn the tables is, and I think this might sound a little strange, but I truly believe in it, that you have to express through your writing, through your affirmations, whatever your practice might be, that you are open to help. I think we get very defensive when we're in trouble and we become closed off to help and possibilities. I actually just think that practice is just a way of asking for help. So if it felt a bit too woo-woo for you, I think for our listeners and our viewers and our members, I would just say you can write down, I am open to help and to the universe bringing me a solution. I cannot see where it's coming from, but I am open to it. Even by bringing yourself to say those words, I'm open to help, you are quite literally priming open the subconscious so that you're looking around and go, oh, that book or that person or that practice or that tool or that choice or that decision, you become open to them. We know what it's like when you batten down the hatches, when you're in the valley of darkness, you ain't open to nothing. You're just trying to survive, right?
You're trying to survive. And what happens sometimes, you bring some people down with you, maybe.
Yeah, right.
Through either accidental misjustice, maybe you drop the ball, or you actually kind of intentionally bring them down because suffering is addictive.
Yes.
And it's suffering has as best friends. But you're right, Mike, if you can adjust your ability to either raise a hand, either subconsciously via your writing or actually physically with others, or you can just get to a point where you start to notice, the smell of the cut grass, a good book on your coffee table or on the shelf, or even, maybe it's sunny or dry outside. You're able to say, actually, what might help me? Going out and experiencing it, or picking up the phone to a friend or a mentor or a family member. Because I think you're right. Each of those elements, whether it's the 12 suns or any sort of way that you can ask for help, it really does make a difference.
Yeah. So we covered a lot of ground here. Some classic Moonshots thinking and some brand new out there kind of thinking. If there was one thing you're kind of curious about, Mark, what's the thing that's really struck you and has created your curiosity?
Well, I was going to say the idea of welcoming adversity, because I've picked up again Frankel's book. However, that would be pretty typically moonshots of me.
Yeah.
And actually, I've enjoyed, Mike, that breakdown of this concept of active love. I think there's a lot of work that I think I can do in there, whether it's on a positive day or a negative day, transforming, challenges, resentment, pain, frustration into something a little bit more positive. It's up to me to do. I am the engine that can convert those emotions.
Yeah.
So I think I might grease that engine and give it a go, actually. What about you? Which one's standing out from today's episode on the tools?
I actually think the vortex, the last one, because, Mark, I've never sat there and written or said out loud, I'm open to finding help. I've never said that.
No, me neither. I don't know why.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, I better work on this one.
I'm going to put it down in my to-do list right now.
Holy smoke, it's going straight in. Mark, a big thank you to you. Thank you for pulling together such a great bunch of clips. And thank you to you, our listeners, our viewers, and our members here for show 270 of the Moonshots Podcast, where we studied the work of Phil Stutz and Barry Michels, and their book is titled The Tools. And boy, did they put us into forward motion. Idea number one was about self-restraint and really embracing that because it truly does set you free. And then we learned about finding the power to really push through tough situations. And in fact, go as far as saying that we welcome adversity. And as we go on that journey, it's all about practicing gratitude and not giving in to resentment, but being active in the way we give out our love into the world. Do those things, ask for help, embrace the vortex, and you will find new, exciting ways to be the best version of yourself, because that is what we are all about here in the Moonshots Podcast. We're learning out loud together. We're doing our best to put life in forward motion. Okay, that's a wrap.